Hey, Jessica, thanks. Meanwhile, anti-government protests in Cuba sparking protests here in the U.S. as well. The situation in Afghanistan also growing dire as troops come home, and pandemic inflation shows no signs of slowing. Just some of the topics we'll talk about this morning with former State Senate President Mike Haridopolos. Mike, good morning. Hope you had a good weekend.
We did, Ryan. Good morning to you.
So let's start with Cuba. Talk about what's happening there, and obviously a big Florida impact because we have so many people here that have moved or have family from Cuba.
Correct, Ryan. 62 years. That's how long the communists have been in power in Cuba. And the people of Cuba looks like they finally had enough of the ilk that is communism. People are struggling in Cuba. If you've ever seen the images down in Cuba, it's like they're in a time warp. You see cars in the 1950s and 60s. It's just a horrific situation with when you go into a grocery store, there's not food on the shelves. It's kind of like the old Soviet Union before they fell. It's a very difficult spot, just 90 miles off our coast. And as you mentioned, it's a very big issue here in Florida, not just because of the proximity, but because so many people who have fled that nation since 1959 are hoping that Cuba will finally be free, remove the ilk of communism, and remove this oppressive police state. When you go out and protest in Cuba and they find out, they're going to come and knock on your door and you might disappear. These are the realities of an aggressive police state that is communism. And let's hope that this time this might be the final action in which Cuba finally becomes free so they can have not only the freedom of choice as far as education and economics, but they have freedom of expression and artists, and let alone getting the internet and getting real information as opposed to what's just provided by the government.
Yeah, let's hope so, Mike. Obviously, protests here in South Florida is when a lot of people in Florida with vested interest there. Let's shift gears now. Is there a way forward for Afghanistan without the U.S.? It was a very quick pullout, and things are a mess right now in that country.
They are. It is a very tough call. Remember, former President Trump said the same thing. It was time to move out of Afghanistan and the Afghanis to run their own nation. It's nation building is not the strength of the United States necessarily. And so after 20 years and hundreds of billions of dollars spent in Afghanistan, let alone the number of lives lost in Afghanistan, the United States has finally said, you know, we're going to see what happens when they decide to run their own nation. It's going to be a challenge. And you're also going to see this de facto Cold War, that meaning that China is going to come into Afghanistan and potentially work with the Taliban, who is likely to fill this power vacuum. And so a very tenuous time there. Let's hope that they can have some stability, but it's going to be a real challenge because the Taliban is a ruthless organization and will do anything for power.
Let's shift gears, bring it back home domestically. We're talking about inflation. And Mike, there are a lot of people that feel inflation is the #1 threat to our economy. Just about everything we report on, prices going up, and people will feel that, and it will hurt a different part of the population very differently.
Absolutely, Ryan. You nailed it. And probably the biggest one for most folks right now is gas prices. They're at a 7-year high, almost $4 a gallon. And this is at a time where we're relying more and more on OPEC. Remember, this is the trouble we got back into the 1970s. We relied on OPEC. Recently, we've become a more energy independent nation with shale production, et cetera. But the Biden administration has shifted away from that policy from President Trump. And so you're seeing the impact now on gas prices. Let's hope that we can increase our oil production, gas production here in the United States. But until then, we're relying on OPEC, and OPEC's not exactly our best buddies. And that means likely AAA is saying higher prices for gasoline. Let's hope they can turn around. And finally, remember, inflation is what hits people disproportionately. The poor and middle class are hit hardest because those food items, gas items are essential everyday items.
We'll continue to watch it. It's a big threat for sure. It's something the stock markets have watched quite a bit as well. Mike, got to leave it there. Appreciate the insight. Have a great Monday.
You as well, Ryan. Have a great week.
That is former State Senate President Mike Haridopolos joining us as he does most Mondays.